Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another live edition of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nick Urias. Good to be back and talking with everybody. It's been about over a week and a half, and apologies, just for being away from the channel for quite a bit. I was dealing with some things off the side, and quite honestly, was not too active even on Twitter and on the social media spaces. So if you were reaching out to me, again, apologies. I know some people on the side within just Mountain West Media were trying to get a hold of me, and appreciate everybody for just giving me some time. Again, just dealing with some stuff off the side, but hey, we're back, we're better, and we're gonna finally get to just some not March basketball, but just Mountain West basketball, because March basketball, I mean, it's going to be here before you know it. I mean, we're officially in the month of February, and this is the time of year now where you got to start paying attention to the bracketologists, refreshing the bubble pretty much every single day now. The way the Mountain West is going right now, just around, the hardwood, things are getting pretty real right now, with San Diego State, Utah State, and New Mexico. New Mexico, we'll talk about them. Last time you probably heard from us was, when San Jose State played New Mexico. Really good game out there in San Jose over a week and a half ago now. And, that was a really well played game. I was there live in person, was the best crowd of the year, out there at the Provident Credit Union Event Center. Of course, good to see our good friend, Ricky Thompson, who does his the New Mexico Lobos podcast, the Cherry Heat Check pod. Got to talk to him, and he was there live at the game at the event center. Really well played game on both sides, but man, that was just one of those games where San Jose State really didn't play that bad in that one. It was just New Mexico played even better. So give credit to the Lobos. Obviously, the stock since that game has kind of, really fallen for New Mexico after suffering back-to-back losses at the pit, which is obviously significant for their Mountain West, at large bid, and, what that means for the NCAA tournament right now. So they're going to need to obviously, do some redeeming for themselves, potentially have some work get done in the Mountain West tournament when we talk from a month from now, just about the ramifications of that bad boy in that crazy environment in the Thomas and Mack Center. So we'll see how that all materializes. But hey, whoever's tuning in right now, or you're checking this out later, we just decided to do a live pod today just because we're going to be previewing some of the Tuesday games. We got ourselves a full slate of the Mountain West going at it. So whether, you tune into the halftime of one of your games, or, you're on it post game afterwards, or 24 hours later, regardless, it'll be up, and, you could just go wherever you need to go. So our plan is for the back end of the week, when we have San Jose State and Grand Canyon in San Jose on Saturday. The plan is to, kind of preview that one, reset, and kind of, talk about Tuesday's action. Probably let's call it Thursday. That one will be, we'll record that one, and then we'll be putting that one out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. So as always, like, comment, subscribe. Always appreciate the feedback and, everybody that interacts with the channel. But let's go ahead and take a look at these standings out in the Mountain West, because a lot of stuff has happened. Since we've last chatted. And, quite honestly, we've had ourselves some high leverage matchups. Uh, San Diego State and Utah State was over a week ago now, and that was a big one by the Aggies, and the Aggies are red hot right now, winners of 5 straight. And when you go to, the pit and win out there, and you win by over 20, you got everybody's attention. And for Utah State to do that after their emotional win versus San Diego State, I thought was pretty noteworthy. I thought Utah State was going to beat San Diego State. It took, some big shots from MJ Collins late for the Aggies to get that one done. And that was a game where he was like 0 for 10 to start out. And you're kind of scratching your head, just about Utah State. But that was a game where they really, showcased their depth in that game. There was no LZ Harrington for San Diego State in that one, which I think ultimately they missed him quite a bit, in a game like that. But man, your depth really matters. And especially at this time of year where, your star players are, starting to hit a little bit of a rough patch, they're getting banged and bumped. It's a toll. It takes a toll on you, especially when you start to get into this league schedule where everybody's played this 4 games in like 9-day stretch by now. And, all of a sudden you're just trying to preserve your body, just to get to the finish line. And we're nowhere near it right now. And I think that's the beauty of Utah State and what they have, going for them. And I think that just goes back to, what we were talking about early on in the season with this team and with their freshmen and with, Elijah Perriman and Adlin Elamine, and the fact that, they could kind of, those guys have come up big for them and big spots for them this year. And that wasn't necessarily in that San Diego State game, but the fact like Colby King, goes off for them and, over 2 weeks ago now in Wyoming, the fact that he can drop 25, right? So it's the fact that your blue chip players don't have to be, having these 35-minute type games where, they're getting run down to the ground, and the physicality of the Mountain West is really getting to them. Because in a game where, let's just, for example, Utah State just destroyed Wyoming in Logan. And then they had that Utah State had San Diego State on deck. They were able to rest their starters, and, you could just go full force on San Diego State. And, when you have to play your starters in a high leverage game like that, that obviously means so much to the standings. You can do so because of, how the way the schedule aligns and because of your depth. So I just think Utah State, with how deep their team is now, going forward, like you're going to really start to see, like, in some of these games this year, like, it's going to, by March time frame, they're going to have more juice than a lot of other teams because they have that luxury with their depth. So with Utah State, I mean, they're clearly the story right now. I mean, there's just not many teams where you're going to be like, man, the fact that you host San Diego State and then go win at the pit, and winning at the pit by 20, it's one thing you win at. First and foremost, it is nearly impossible based on what New Mexico's home winning streak was over, 22, 23 games. That's almost stretching nearly 2 years, right? So the fact that you go into the pit and just win the game, obviously, just deserves some headlines. But the fact that they went in there and won by 20, the game was close at the break. The game was really close at halftime. And the fact that they just went in there in that second half and punched them in the mouth, and New Mexico just kind of looked lost offensively, on top of, what Utah State was doing to themselves defensively. I mean, that's as big as a statement as you're going to have this year. So you got to credit the Aggies. Jared Calhoun had them ready. And, now Utah State, I mean, they survived the scare, at Laramie, which hasn't really been like the tremendous, venue this year from hey, a lot of teams are going to go into Laramie and struggle. For the most part, it's been Fresno. That's, really been, I guess, like the gauntlet and the sleepy venue this year where, if you play your B- game, you might barely come out of the game alive. I imagine based on the way Wyoming started the year, that a lot of people anticipated it was going to be the Pokes this year that was maybe going to be the team that picked everybody off, kind of in that tricky spot that we've seen in years past in the Mountain West. But man, like I said, Utah State certainly making a statement. And they got Fresno State tonight, which we'll dive into the Tuesday night Mountain West action here momentarily. As far as San Diego State, there's really no reason to hit the panic button on this team, right? I mean, they're 11-2 in league play, and they're not going to really look pretty in a lot of their games, right? Just because of their style and their physicality. They have some, blowout potential that they've had this year in some games versus Air Force and Fresno State at home. And, there's no really any reason, I guess, to really worry about San Diego State, even though every once in a while, when they kind of don't play great for 25, 30 minutes, in some of these games on these, prime time windows on national TV, we kind of scratch our heads a little bit. Look, the crowd at the Mountain West tournament, as long as they don't take one of these silly losses, which Dutchard never really has, since he's really been under the helm out there in at San Diego State, there's really no reason to worry about them. As long as they don't take that quad 3, quad 4 loss, of course. And then obviously their road games are going to be pretty important. And, all those games where, all those bubble teams, I should say this, all the teams that are on the bubble, they're clearly rooting against them. And then they're going to just have to handle their business in the Mountain West tournament, right? They can't go one and done like they did last year, which obviously, depending on the bracket, I think we're way too far ahead from that right now. As far as, this Mountain West tournament bracket, because, this could all flip on its head in a week, right? And, you've seen that with back-to-back losses at home for New Mexico. We never thought we'd say that. So things can change in a hurry. But as far as San Diego State's concerned, I think they just need to be worried about healthy, because, even though, the San Diego State team has, its depth, I have to say, like, these guys, like, you see it, they're a little bit banged up themselves. Like, you always hold your breath with Reese Waters, right? That he doesn't get hurt, because he's had some not the greatest injury history. LZ Harrington's been kind of, on the injury report every game, right? I know Miles Birds came up big for them in some spots. Taj DeGorville's been really good, I would say, the past couple weeks now, when he's kind of had to start and he's become more of a scoring threat. And then most importantly, there's just another gear to San Diego State when Magoon Guath is healthy. And that's what they're waiting for. Who knows if he comes back? I haven't heard anything, substantial that he's going to be ruled out for the year. But they need him by the Mountain West tournament if they want to win it, right? Because, Utah State, I mean, Boise could certainly, the way their current form is right now, they could most certainly, go get at them. And, Grand Canyon and Nevada most certainly surprise. So look, I mean, we'll see what the bracket looks like when we get there in a month. But yeah, San Diego State, no reason to hit the panic button for them. Just all about getting healthy. As far as New Mexico is concerned, so I saw this team in person, and man, they looked really impressive a week and a half ago. I mean, they hung over 80 points in San Jose. I think it was like 90-80, if memory serves me correct. It was a crazy offensive outburst from Jake Hall. I mean, he had like 7 threes, hit 25 points. I think Urias had like 16 off the bench. Man, that guy Tannett is just one of those jackrabbits, 5'11". He's running all over the place. Get it in your grill. He's going to pick your pocket a couple times. Jake Hall is one of those guys where, he needs the ball in his hands for half a second and he'll go up, fling it, and make it from 3. He was really impressive, but I was just more so impressed, like, when Dayton Albury kind of has to take over, when he has to play make, he doesn't get in the way of what the freshmen are doing, because it's really good. Those guys are really connected right now, those young pieces for New Mexico. And, this is something that we talked about with our buddy Ricky. was that I think at the heading into the year, we thought Albury was just going to be this all out scorer. He doesn't have to be that guy because of all the weapons that they have. And, when you watch that game versus Boise State in New Mexico, on Saturday, I would, in a spot like that when Jake Hall is struggling, I'd like Dayton Albury to just be a little bit more aggressive. Get to the free throw line, slow the game down, especially when Boise's punching you in the mouth and they're hitting all these threes. And it was kind of, I would say, like an outlier game, but 3-point shooting standpoint for Boise State. They're not going to hit 17 threes in all these games. That's just not going to happen, right? So, yeah, in situations like that, when a game gets hairy, I want Albury to take over. Luke Haupt, so it was very interesting because I was broadcasting the game and I was diving in onto his story a little bit more, prepping for SJSU New Mexico. This guy was a 4-year Division II guy, 4 or 5-year D2 guy. And I think he was at Point Loma. He was at Point Loma, and, basically, Eric Olin gave him a shot because Olin is very familiar with the Division II, pipeline, because UC San Diego was once upon a time a Division II, and he was there for over a decade. So he was, as much, even though he was in D1 at the Big West for UC San Diego, he was kind of always keeping an eye out on the D2 level. And, that just comes naturally, right? So, you always got guys that I imagine on your coaching staff that are kind of going into, different areas, in different certain parts of the country to kind of recruit and, find talent and see what works within your system. But yeah, Luke Haupt, that guy is like the ultimate like glue guy. It's like everybody knows RJ Keene for Boise. If you following the Mountain West now, RJ Keene for Boise State, like how important he is, gets the important rebound, has that hockey assist pass, right? Every once in a while we'll, have the occasional three, and he just impacts winning. Luke Haupt for New Mexico just impacts winning. And it was just one of those games for him where, when nobody's going except him in that Boise State game on Saturday. And, he had over like 33 points, whatever. It stunk that he fouled out. This is just one of those games for both sides where Boise just comes out flying and making all these threes, and Boise looked a whole lot better, I would say, over the past 3 weeks now. And, New Mexico, man, that's back-to-back losses at the pit is obviously not great. And especially with how rocky Boise State has been, preseason expectations were pretty high for that group. KenPom and net ratings are, not as high as everybody hoped it'd be. But, I would say for New Mexico, when you lose back-to-back games at home, that's not great, especially when you're floating around the bubble. And, Tim Miles after the game for San Jose State head coach saying, hey, New Mexico's the most complete San Jose State head coach. Excuse me. Let's reset all that. San Jose State head coach Tim Miles said after the game, New Mexico's the most complete team that they've played this year. And, I thought that really spoke volumes on just the team. And then, you get you get an elite team in Utah State and a Boise State team where, some people believe that they can be elite, right? If they could put it all together with their guard play, which is something that they've been doing here, in their pretty most in their best stretch the past 3 weeks. And, that's what it could turn into. It could snowball pretty quick. And, all these games matter. And, all of a sudden when, you got other teams on the bubble that are winning and other teams dropping out, your season can flip in a hurry. So New Mexico's got to get back on the right track, and it doesn't get any easier for them because they got Grand Canyon tomorrow on the road. So that's going to obviously be a pretty noteworthy game for both sides. And, Grand Canyon's going to be pretty pissed off after coming off a loss to UNLV in Las Vegas. So pretty there. A noteworthy game, I would say, for both sides. because Grand Canyon's trying to get back on track a little bit. I know they've been terrific, but teams off a loss. You can't go on a losing streak in this league. If you want to be fighting for at-large, bid for the NCAA tournament. So we'll see how that pans out. As far as Boise State's concerned, so last time we were on, we were leading up to the Grand Canyon Boise game, and I said, hey, Boise's got every chance in the world to go into Grand Canyon and win the game. And Grand Canyon, that place is like a party, and that is nuts. It is absolutely nuts when you go in there. And honestly, like, I thought Boise's guards were just completely underwhelming in that game. And like I said, they've played a lot better. Dylan Andrews played the best game of his career on Saturday. He dropped 33 points, a career high, right? So, this is something that we're probably going to be dealing with all year for Boise. Like, hey, it's going to come down to what their guard play looks like. And, that could change based on, different defenses and how hostile the environment is. And that's what it's going to come down to. If this team had Alvaro Cardenas and instead of Dylan Andrews, like if you just took out Andrews and plopped in Cardenas, this team I feel like would be, top 3 in the Mountain West. They'd be that good because in that game at Grand Canyon for Boise, there was just no reason why Andrew Meadow could only take 4 shots in the game. One of your top scorers, one of your best shooters on the team, he can't be taking 4 shots a game. Like, that just can't happen. And, sometimes, I thought AG NATO didn't play the greatest game in Phoenix, Arizona. And, that snowballed into, some massive 5-point swings. And then you get a guy like Dusty Stromer for Grand Canyon that comes flashing and, has his best shooting performance. The game can flip in a hurry. And, Javen Buchanan hit a 3 at the horn before halftime, at Grand Canyon, and it was like a 1-possession game. And then when you have those 5-point swings, by the 10-minute mark, 8-minute mark of the second half, the game's over, right? So, Boise's guards weren't great in that game. In fact, they weren't great at all. They weren't good at all. And, I think that is going to dictate a lot of what Boise's trajectory is going forward because you like, their bigs and their forwards. Dominic Parolin's been playing better, I would say, over the past 2 weeks. And, he's getting more minutes. Meadow and Fielder are Fielder's really emerged over the past 3 weeks. Meadows just, he's not being too aggressive, and I want him to be more aggressive, in some of these games. But, he's not going to force up shots, and I don't want him to. Javen Buchanan is a great slashing forward, and when he gets to the free throw line, he hits everything, right? So, the aggressive nature within the Boise forwards have been pretty solid, even going back to, like, their loss at UNLV over a month ago. It's been pretty rock solid. But their guards have to be able to create for those guys. And if you could get the version of Dylan Andrews that you get on Saturday, this team's going to win the Mountain West probably, right? Because when you're getting 33 points and you're spacing out the floor and the defense is on its heels, you're going to be unguardable. But the bottom line is I just don't expect that from every game. I don't expect the scoring outburst from Dylan Andrews like that every game, even though he won Mountain West Player of the Week and he had 58 points in 2 games last week. I just don't expect that when, in March in the Mountain West tournament, let's just say you draw like a San Diego State and that place is, just on fire with San Diego State fans. And, there's Boise fans there, but it's going to just feel like a true road game in a sense, even though it's on a neutral floor. So, I want to see a little bit more of a bigger sample, especially, on the road a little bit more. Boise's been playing much better. I'm not denying that. But they've been playing better, but I want to see a little bit more from them and just their consistency within their guards. In a game like that. If if this continues for another week, I mean, I'm gonna continue, to keep buying in, because like I said this, and I'm gonna keep saying this on pretty much every single podcast that we record leading up to the Mountain West tournament. Whoever is the hottest team in February and carries that into the Mountain West tournament is more than likely going to win this. Is more than likely going to win this tournament, because we've seen it now, like time and time again, where the upper echelon teams in the league, just when they're rolling hot, they're really tough to stop. And the crowd will come along with them, and they're going to be good in the clutch time games, and there's just that certain buy-in and belief within that team, and everybody's just on the same page. And we saw it with Colorado State last year. We saw it with New Mexico 2 years ago. You saw it with San Diego State 3 years ago, when they went on and, obviously they went on their national championship run. It's just, there's just something about momentum in the Mountain West that just comes around this time of year in February and continues all throughout March. As far as, just some games for tonight that I do want to touch on. Obviously, Tuesday in the Mountain West is always pretty big. There's always high leverage matchups, of course. For, I would say, the next couple days. Actually, today's Mountain West slate on a Tuesday is not the most glamorous. You got 3 gigantic favorites. Colorado State at Air Force, and they're 16-point favorite. Utah State at Fresno, or Fresno's at Utah State. That was a crazy game last year, if anybody recalls it. Fresno was down like 12 points in the early going last year in Logan. They were down 12 points, came all the way back, took like a 10-point lead, almost like got blown out again. And then all of a sudden, like, we're in it and we're playing the foul game. It was just a crazy game. And Fresno was all over the place last year. And, I saw a lot of people talking about Fresno last week over, just their incredible comeback versus UNLV. And I would say it was a great comeback, but it was more of a, just UNLV, gagging on the road down the stretch, more so than anything, I felt like. But Fresno's been, one of the more bigger surprises. I said, a couple of weeks ago, or over a month ago now, when they picked off, what was it, Colorado State and Wyoming, I said, hey, you got to give Vance Wahlberg a whole lot of credit for what he's done. For what was the disaster last year, worst year in program history. I mean, you had people gambling on their team, and, the locker room was like gone. And you had the guys like Alex Crawford and Brian Ammunique, and, that just wanted to go out and get their NIL dough and weren't really committed there. Right. And Wahlberg, he went, what? I need to go get some mature guys. He kept Zayon Collins, who's been a leader for that team. They get Jake Heidbreeder, who has been in the Mountain West, but, wanted some more playing time compared to what he was getting at Clemson. And with those two guys on top of Deshaun Gorey, and then, kind of getting some other guys meshed in on top of that, they've been a fun team. They've been a really fun team. I couldn't believe the other day when somebody told me they were first in defending the 3. I would have never guessed that. But I guess they've been that good in that category. So, kudos to them. But, Fresno on the road, I mean, they're not going to win this game. They're not going to win at Logan, but this is going to be a 10-point game. I don't see it being that way. And, if you're Fresno State, I mean, you got to go out there and compete. I know some of their road games haven't been like crazy. Their defense hasn't been tremendous on the road this year. I talked about, defending the 3, something that, like I said, like a stat I wouldn't have believed in if you, told me that. But I mean, Fresno's been a really, fun team this year. Like I said, on the home, they've been, sneaky good and, been pretty magical. And on the road, like for a lot of these teams, it's just different. But I'll say this: Utah State's won 5 in a row. They got their scare out versus Wyoming, so this might be a full focused 40-minute effort from them. The fact that Utah State didn't play the greatest at the Safe Mart Center too in their conference opener might, have them, fully engaged here, and Calhoun will have them ready. But I mean, the wise guys in Vegas have them, and all the Ken Palm people have them winning by 21. I think that's a bit rich for the blood there, from a win margin standpoint. And then, of course, we got you got Colorado State at Air Force, you got Fresno at Utah State, and then you got San Jose State at UNLV. So let's go ahead and dive into a little bit of the Spartans. Briefly touch New Mexico, but I thought that was quite honestly, one of their more better losses of the year when you kind of go up and down and chalk it all up, right? Because I thought they played pretty good versus New Mexico. I just thought New Mexico played better from an offensive standpoint. They looked pretty good a week and a half ago, last time they were at home, right? And they've been on the road sometime now. They lost at Colorado State in a game that I thought, they didn't really play too bad in either in that one. So, we'll pull up the box score here right now. A 57-65 loss for SJSU on Saturday. I mean, I thought this was, a game where, look, San Jose State is winless in true road games this year. And they trailed 30-29 on the road. Jermaine Washington didn't play in this game, so you're left without one less scoring punch. Coach Miles talked about after the New Mexico game, like, hey, everybody's gonna starting jobs open for everybody. He's kind of had to reevaluate things, since their injury bug and their struggles, just to kind of figure out, what's going on with this team. And SJSU said, hey, we're going to have, 4 days of practice and go in a starting spot. And that's why in that New Mexico game, you had Jermaine Washington come off the bench. Melvin Bell got the start. Marcus Overstreet got a start, right? And it was just kind of like, hey, go earn it. And, I thought that was, noteworthy for, Coach Miles to, be doing that in February. I mean, he's just trying to figure this thing out, and he's trying to maximize this roster right now. Because, even though this team's been extremely banged up, I mean, you got bodies back now. And you have Kobe Garland back, and Garland looks back to normal right now. I know he struggled the first 2 games off the injury, and they were kind of managing his minutes and getting a good sweat out of him, just kind of to revamp him. But I thought his game versus New Mexico was pretty good. Looked comfortable. The mid-range shot was going. And, when he hits that, right elbow jumper, when he's kind of fading, firing and hitting, and he's got the floater going and he's working his way to the line, that's Kobe Garland's game. So, I thought, Garland since the New Mexico game, I thought has been pretty much right back to form as we saw back into November, front end of December timeframe, right? When he was having several 20-point games, and he had a 21-point performance in this one, right? It's just all about can you get other people involved, right? And especially on the road. SJSU only made 5 threes in this game. They would have put up a ton more threes if Washington was out there, because Washington, I mean, doesn't take much airspace for him to get it off. And, they want that spacing for him just to kind of, get things, going. As far as a big man presence for this team, I mean, without Yafet Mundi, I mean, they're going to be on the struggle bus until he gets back. Which from what I understand, I think he's going to be coming back this year. I'll try to get a timetable on that. We'll see what happens. He's ruled out at UNLV tonight. But we'll see what happens at Grand Canyon on Saturday, and then we'll kind of go from there. to see, if there is a timetable or what's going on, or if we can get anything out of coach in that regard, because he's a big piece, number 2 scorer. And, when they're now looks like they're going to start staggering this minutes, or at least for this game, they tried, just throwing different options out there. Overstreet only played 8 minutes. Mopadelli got more minutes. And, just trying to figure out, this was a tough matchup for the bigs. And, it's going to, like I said, it's going to be a tough matchup for the bigs. But, I mean, when you lose the rebound battle by 20, I mean, you're not going to win the game. In college, you're just not going to win the game, especially when you only make 5 threes. It's not going to work out for you. Colorado State is, one of the more slower teams, but I thought they played a little faster from what I've seen from them, this year. They kind of switched up their lineup themselves because they were playing Bemba and Jorgensen together, and now they've just completely split the minutes. So they're kind of trying to space things out themselves because they play much slower when Bemba's out there, it seems like. Because Jorgensen's a stretch 5 and he can kind of go run and gun with with Pasquarelli and Rexsteiner, right? And, Kerry Booth is a long and lengthy guy where, they could just have him go get rebounds and have Jorgensen, be that stretch 5 and space out the floor a little bit more. And, they just kind of rotate things out, with, Kudelis and, Butler and, kind of split the minutes that way. But, yes, I mean, CSU's been, not the greatest team this year. But, this is by far, SJSU's one of their better road performances of the year. I know nobody wants to hear that out there in San Jose, when you have probably your second best road loss, at Colorado State. And, obviously the Wyoming game, you were in it till the very end, right? You just couldn't get a shot up at the end of the game. So, we'll see what this looks like tonight at UNLV. As far as some other things that kind of just really flashed in this game, Pasha Gadarzi, 15 points. I mean, he got the start in this one, with, Melvin Bell. I need more of Melvin Bell. He's going to start starting in a lot more of these games. I don't think he's going to be coming off the bench, anymore for the rest of the year. I mean, that's just, he's too much of a high upside player for Coach Miles, where he's got to be able to, impact and really take the game over. I do think they're still trying to, him and Garland are kind of trying to, establish things themselves in that backcourt because how much Garland and Washington have played together. So we'll see how that develops tonight because Washington is questionable for this game. And, I would probably say he's not going to play this game. That's not official word or anything, and I don't got any news on it. But, that would just be kind of my best guess where you just kind of roll with the same lineup that you did at CSU because it wasn't, terrible. The fact that they only lost by 8 and they had a second half lead at one point. But yeah, we'll see how this thing goes. We all know how erratic UNLV has been. And when you kind of just revisit the game from 3.5 weeks ago, it kind of gives you, a little bit of maybe some hope. If you're, just an SJSU fan, like, hey, the way this 76-62 win went for UNLV, and the fact that they won by 14 and, shot the hell out of the ball from 3, 54% as a whole, nearly 50% from 3, kind of gives you like, hey, look, UNLV they went into our house, won by 14. They made 11 threes, which is something that who knows, they'll probably not going to do that again, at the Thomas and Mack Center tonight. And we were down 4 starters, SJSU was, right? So you didn't have Kobe Garland in this game. You didn't have Ben Roseborough in this game. He's still out. You didn't have Mundi. You didn't have Washington. And you didn't have Javon Anna, right? So when you're kind of rolling out this lineup that SJSU had, youtube.com/@thesportsentiment, kind of gives you like, hey, and especially the way UNLV's just kind of been, erratic to say the least, at something that we've touched on a ton on this podcast, and they're coming off a win versus Grand Canyon, right? At home. This would kind of be one of those, letdown games for UNLV, kind of like what we've seen from them. And, they haven't really seen Kobe Garland. They've seen him on tape, but this is kind of a different beast when you kind of see him in person. And, if you could, I'm not saying you need 22 points out of Melvin Bell, but if you could just get more than 7 out of Melvin Bell from what you got on Saturday, this could be a game where, SJSU is hanging around in and, competing like in that one and, versus Colorado State and how they were at Wyoming. Some injury notes for UNLV. You got a couple of guys questionable that really went off in this first meeting. Howie Fleming didn't play last game, dropped 21 points, was really good, had 8 assists to go along with those 21. If he does not play, that is obviously significant, news that will obviously help SJSU because that is, practically UNLV's 2-guard. Handles a lot of, plays off the ball because Dre Gibbs Lawhorn runs this offense for UNLV. And when you have a guy that dropped 21 off of you and, was essentially the point guard in that game, obviously it changes some things a little bit, right? And then UNLV has way less depth. And then all of a sudden, Isaac Williamson is playing, a full 35 minutes when he came off the bench in this first meeting and only had 20. And by the way, I thought Isaac Williamson, the freshman for UNLV, hit some timely shots in that game for the Rebs. So, we'll see how that plays out because I do think he could be a guy that flashes and, is a potential X factor in a game like this tonight. But at the same time, you could say that for some guys on SJSU's end as well. Also, Tyron Jones, the very, uber athletic, freshman front court piece that UNLV has at their disposal as well. That's been starting a lot of games in Mountain West play. He's also been out. He's questionable right now on the injury report. So keep refreshing that injury report. That is obviously some big news. UNLV could be down 2 starters tonight. Which means Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, you're going to hear his name a lot. Kimani Hamilton's going to be, the primary front court piece with Emmanuel Steffen, who's been starting a ton. But I will say this, as athletic as UNLV is, Hamilton and Steffen are kind of reckless guys from the standpoint where they're going to foul you a ton. And this is something that we've talked about quite a bit here with UNLV, where there's just not that much discipline on the defensive end. They'll have, a high-flying dunk from one of those guys on one end, and then next thing you know, it's a 3-point play the old-fashioned way, on the other side. Or they don't get back on defense, and it's an easy layup the other way. So I do think this game could kind of get pretty nuts tonight, if I'm being quite honest. Just because San Jose State's defense has been non-existent for a large majority of the year. And UNLV's, defense, has a lot of breakdowns to it. And I do think Dre Gibbs Lawhorn's going to have himself a good game. He's going to put up a ton of shots in this one. So, I do think this game could potentially get a little wild. This game is on national TV. It's an 8:00 start here on the West Coast, and it's on FS1. So, buckle up because a lot of these UNLV games are pretty nuts. From what I've noticed too, and especially, when they're at the Thomas and Mack Center, they get pretty wild. Obviously, they played last Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever it was. And that Fresno State game was just, in a class of its own. So this is obviously an intriguing game, but the injury report for UNLV is pretty significant because if Fleming's out and Jones is out for UNLV, and SJSU's got a chance to win this game, I feel like. And, that's not something that we've said pretty often here, especially when they've been on the road, because Coach Miles' teams on the road just haven't been good. I mean, even last year's teams went to the NIT and, they had some pretty good wins last year. And, that team was not even that good on the road. They were non-existent in a lot of spots. And, they'd get rocked by 15, 20 plus, or, they'd have their occasional get up game. This is one of the few winnable games that I feel like for SJSU, just based on what the starting lineup could read for UNLV, plus all the bodies that are getting back. Plus, when you look at the data point of this game from the first matchup, SJSU might be able to pick apart some things a little bit. And, I do think, there's some things where, San Jose State could really go off here, and they could really play make. I mean, look at this. You look at this box score, 5 assists for San Jose State in the first game. I mean, Garland's going to have 5 assists in, the game himself in this one. So, I mean, it was a lot of isolation basketball for a guy like Melvin Bell. Not a lot of things getting open. There was just not much ball movement. And, UNLV was able to just really collapse, on a guy like Bell in that first matchup. So, something to keep an eye on. This is going to be a completely different game from what we had 3.5 weeks ago in San Jose because of the bodies that San Jose State has back. So, I would say, I would honestly be pretty shocked if San Jose State lost this game by, 15 plus. I would say this game's probably got single digits, in the cards. So, we'll see how it plays out, and, we'll see what this looks like going forward, because they'll be back at home versus Grand Canyon. And, Grand Canyon's a team that, again, we'll see what they look like, at home versus New Mexico. New Mexico's been pretty pissed off. And, I'm interested to just see that Grand Canyon team, in person, because they've looked tremendous in some spots this year, especially on the road. They've gotten up on the road, and UNLV hung 44 on them in the first half on Saturday, and, let up a little bit, but ultimately closed it out. So, GCU is a really talented team. Their defense has been really good this year. It travels. So I'm interested to see one more game, for Grand Canyon on tomorrow night, before we officially see them in person on Valentine's Day this Saturday. So a whole lot to look forward to. Obviously, Mountain West has been great. College hoops is in, it's a fun time right now in the sport. I mean, there's just so many high leverage, conference games. And man, I was watching that Arizona-Kansas game last night, and, how can you not be glued to the TV, whether Darren Peterson plays or not, which is, a mess of its own. But man, Fog Allen Fieldhouse, that's a special place. That's what the sport is all about. And, all I'm going to just say is, not the last time you hear me say this, cherish while we have it right now, because I think we're all going to be sad around, in 2 months from now, when the portal's opening up and players are moving and leaving, and, quite honestly, a lot of these teams are going to get rated in the portal again, and you're going to be like, damn, the sport is great, and, you're going to be watching games during the off season. So all I say is just cherish it, cherish those home court environments. Go get out to a game. I mean, I was at Stanford and Clemson the other night. Go get out to a game. There's nothing like witnessing a game live in person, because when you're sitting on your couch in June, you're going to be like, damn, I wish I went to that basketball game. And, they're only $10 these games. So, at least around the parts around here in the Bay Area. So, hey, go out, enjoy a game, enjoy it on TV, for your team. We'll most certainly be covering all things Mountain West here on the Sports Sentiment. We'll be back on Thursday. We'll have ourselves a recap of all the Tuesday night action, along with everything going around, just the landscape of college basketball. Going to start doing some things big picture, especially with everything that's coming about now with, just all things, NCAA tournament. Getting into that time of year where you got to keep an eye on this stuff. The Big 12's been awesome. I'm talking, the Big 12 basketball. The SEC's got some entertaining games. The ACC, Duke, Carolina. How can you not be entertained with that rivalry? It's a fun time of year, so enjoy it while we have it. But that'll do it for me here, out here on the Sports Sentiment. Once again, I am your host, Nick Urias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.